Hi, Michael here. Recording from my dressing room in Poznan, Poland. Poznan is where my show Altenheim Stadtdom is playing, the show that I co-wrote with Marcin Wierzchowski, who is a wonderful director that I collaborate with frequently in Poland. We currently have 3 shows on, including this, which was our first show. We premiered in February 2022, and here we are in September of 2024. What was that? 3.5 years later? 2.5 years later. And we are still doing the show. We're at the beginning of the season, September. We'll do the show now 3 times, and we'll come back in December and do it 3 times. Anyways, I love the system. This is not what this is about, however, but I just, shout out to the system of theater making in Poland. But today I want to talk about stage managers, or Incpicjants, which is the Polish word for stage manager. Now this is, something for Polish people and non-Polish people, Canadian people, or let's say English theater people, non-European people. And I want to talk about stage managers because the roles and responsibilities of the stage manager are very, very different, particularly when the show begins. And this was a total surprise for me. So, a stage manager or an Incpicjant, basically during a rehearsal process, their job is the same as any stage manager. They're there to manage the rehearsal process. It's not as rigorous, I would say, as in Canada, which is what I'm used to. Like a stage manager, they're there all the time, whether they want to be or not. If they're bored or they're not, they just stay. Here, sometimes the stage manager won't stick around if they're not interested in the way the rehearsals are going. But that's just been my experience. That's not necessarily the norm, but basically the job is more or less the same. They communicate the schedule. They're supposed to communicate the schedule to the actors, etc., etc. But what's really different is when the shows begin, and this is really, really fascinating. So, the biggest difference is that in Canada, are basically like the English world, Canada, America, England, Australia, Ireland, Scotland. Stage managers call the show. They call the show. In Poland, anyways, and I think lots of Europe, they don't call the show. So what do I mean by call the show? So if you're, if you work in the English language world, you know exactly what I mean by call the show. But if you don't, I'll explain. So a stage manager sits in the booth. The booth is usually situated at the back of the theater where the technicians and everyone sits. The stage manager sits in that booth, and in front of them they have a book. The book, is what the term is for, basically like a big binder, and in the binder is the script for the show. And it's kind of like the Bible for the show. Everything, the script and other documents. But most importantly, in the script, the stage manager has written down when every single cue for the show is to be called, including entrances and exits for actors, but mostly all lights and sound. And then the stage manager is the one responsible for telling the technicians when to press the button that will make that cue go. So if it's a lighting cue, the stage manager will say, lighting cue 23, go. And they'll know on exactly what line in the script they are to do that. In Poland, a stage manager does not do that at all. During the show, the stage manager sits backstage, and mostly they're there to cue actors for their entrances and exits. And if there's a fly gallery is like, when scenery goes up and down, there are people backstage who are literally pulling ropes to make the scenography go up and down. The stage manager will cue those people when to pull the ropes so the scenography goes up and down. But they don't cue the technicians. The technicians are responsible for learning the show themselves and learning when each cue has to be called. So if you are the lighting man or woman, you have to know the show, and you have to know when the cues come. You might have the script in front of you, or you just might know the show. There's no one to tell you when to do those cues. Same with sound. There's no one to tell you. You've got to know. In fact, I think that in Poland, it would be absurd for technicians to imagine that somebody else would tell you what to do that, because, when I ask, they might say, well, then what exactly is my job? If I'm just pushing a button and the stage manager is calling everything, what's in it for me? Which is interesting, right? Because I think that it's a far more involved, engaging, and interesting job for technicians. And I would say, in a way, it's like the technicians on a show become far more a part of the team as a result of it. They need to know the show. They have agency over the show. They need to know it. They have to be present. They have to be listening. They have to do all of these things that keeps them engaged, that makes them a team member. They have to be creative. Whereas in Canada, technicians just often will press buttons. I'm being reductive, but it's a huge, huge difference and super interesting. I thought at first it would be complete and total chaos. Like, how could that work without a stage manager? Caught in my brain and the system that I grew up with. But it's fine. It's totally fine. And you might go, well, what if there's a different technician and another technician has to show up, or there's this. They learn the show. They learn the show quickly. It happens quickly because that's the system. You have to know how to learn it quickly, or you can't do the job. So it's fascinating. Like, I'm about to do my new show in a week and a half, my newest show, and apparently I've got 2 new technicians who've never seen the show, don't know the show at all. So they have to learn the show. There's no stage manager there who's going to give them the cues. They have to learn the show. So we have to have one additional rehearsal for them, a couple hours. We'll go through the cues, they'll learn the show, and then they'll do it. Anyways, I'm not sure which is better as a system, but it's interesting. It's interesting. I think it's more interesting for the technicians who work on shows this way, because they have to know the shows. Anyways, yeah, super interesting. Anyways, hope that's interesting for you. There's a theater schmeater video. I like doing them. And I don't know if it's interesting for you, but hopefully it is. Let me know. Thanks. Bye.